This video is from a channel called Budget Lawns, and it's called "You're Doing Too Much to Fertilize Your Lawn," which immediately got my interest because, like, well, you're probably true. A case against Milorganite and soil tests for grass. Now, if you know me, if you've listened to this channel, I'm not anti-soil test. I'm just anti-soil test for no good reason, right? I mean, if you have a good reason, then I'm all for it. But to me, a good reason is oftentimes light years away from the reasons people are using soil tests or taking soil tests. And so he has a case against Milorganite and soil tests, and that's very unusual for most YouTube lawn care people, just the average homeowner, to have a video about not soil testing or having a concern about soil testing the grass. Most of them will say, you got a soil test, you got to take a soil test, you got to buy this $15 soil test, and you can, it'll automatically come in the mail, and you'll automatically get the fertilizer and the order and all this other stuff. So they're using it as a means for, capitalizing on something, whatever. But you just don't see an average home person, an average lawn care operator, have a video saying, yeah, you probably shouldn't soil test as much as you think you should. And so that got my interest, the title. So good job on the title. So let's get into it before I get to this. We're going to be here forever if I don't get into this thing. So again, it's by Budget Lawns. You're doing too much to fertilize your lawn. And it's about 5 minutes. I'll do my best to get through it with keeping my mouth shut. Okay.
I can only think of one good reason to use a fertilizer derived from biosolids. Other than that, they're just not part of my plan anymore. What is a biosolid fertilizer? You might often hear the words organic or natural, but unless the label on the bag says derived from biosolids, I'm not talking about that kind of fertilizer. This description comes from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Biosolids are a product of the wastewater treatment process. During wastewater treatment, the liquids are separated from the solids. Those solids are then treated physically and chemically to produce a semi-solid, nutrient-rich product known as biosolids. The terms biosolids and sewage sludge are often used interchangeably. When applied to land at the appropriate agronomic rate, biosolids provide a number of benefits, including nutrient-rich addition, improved soil structure, and water reuse. So it's not to say that these types of fertilizers don't have their place in lawn care. I just don't find them beneficial for me anymore. And here's why. As I've gained more experience in lawn care, I've become more confident in using products. And the main reason I used to use biosolids was it doesn't burn your lawn. So if you're a lawn care rookie and just getting started, this is one advantage. You don't have to worry about applying too much and frying your grass.
Well, that much is definitely true. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you don't even want to know some of the stuff I've done with biosolids in the name of science. I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible to burn turfgrass with biosolids, but whatever rate it is far greater than you can possibly ever mess up with or imagine. I mean, I've literally put on biosolids on turfgrass so thickly, if that's a word, so dense and so much biosolids that you could barely see the leaf blades being green. In other words, it was all black. And I just left a couple leaf blades poking up from the top because I thought it would kill it if I just completely buried it. And watered that sucker in. And as soon as those leaves got up through there, it just took right off. There was no burn. So that much I can have a great deal of confidence in. You're not going to burn any grass with a biosolid. Let me go ahead and play it, and I'll address some of the comments in the chat.
But if that's the only reason I'm going to use it, the number one reason I don't want to use it is it's just way too expensive. I don't have to be a math whiz to know that these biosolid products can be twice as much or even more expensive than just your general all-purpose fertilizer for 1 pound of nitrogen.
For those people who haven't watched that video that I did, he's right about that. It can be twice or more. And the work that I've done on it, whether it's price per pound of N or if you use the Turfgrass Response Longevity, it ends up being about 4 to 7 times more expensive, depending on how you quantify the cost, the price. But it's it's deceptive because the bag price can be somewhat competitive, but the amount of nitrogen in the bag is so low that you'd have to buy many, many more bags in order to equal the amount of nitrogen from another bag, like say a 2100 or something like that. So it seems to the average person that it's a good deal because the bag price is so low. But in fact, it's much, much more expensive than another comparable fertilizer on the cost per pound of nitrogen. So he's definitely on target there.
For the cost and the benefit of not burning, it's just too expensive for me. The cost isn't the only reason why I've abandoned biosolids as part of my lawn care plan. As the years go by, I've also just lowered my expectations out of what I want from my grass. And I have found that a general all-purpose synthetic quick-release fertilizer does enough for me.
This is where I kind of I cringed a little bit. I was like, man, he's on the right track. He's on the right track, and hold tight. He's still on the right track. He's definitely. I'm not judging him here, but I saw this 10-10-10. I'm like, oh, but he uses that as an example, so it's all good. But he's saying all-purpose synthetic fertilizer is what he's been using, and I'll say that you can go back and look in the literature for decades, and you're going to be there for a long time before you ever find any literature that supports a biosolid above a synthetic when it comes to response or cost. You're not going to find it. So these synthetic fertilizers are, for many, many decades, it's been consistent that they are the most effective financial product, and in terms of turfgrass response, they're very, very, very good. It's hard to beat them. So well done, well said. Keep going.
I don't need to add a biosolid to extend that nitrogen effect.
Man, see, I wonder if he had that opinion before he listened to my channel. If he did, then kudos to him. Great. I wish I knew his name. I'd use his name. But great. If he knew that beforehand, then all power to you. But if he didn't know before he listened and watched the channel, and now he knows, that is impact. That's why I do what I do. If he didn't know beforehand. If he knew beforehand, then great. But this makes me so happy to see people start to move more towards management practices that are supported by evidence. And like I said, maybe he knew it beforehand. But let's continue. I'll be here for eternity because I just want to keep talking about it.
A dark green lush lawn just isn't at the top of my priority list anymore. I'm more focused on keeping it nice and thick and relatively weed-free. If I can do those things, I'm happy. But that's still not the most important reason why I've moved away from biosolids. As the years have gone by and I become more and more educated in lawn care, I start to rethink some of my practices, in particular the use of phosphorus. Getting a soil test done every year to drive my fertilizer decisions has just never been a good enough explanation for me. I've always held true to the eye test. If your lawn looks like it needs to be fed, then feed it. If it looks full and healthy, then leave it alone. Trust me, I've heard over and over again how irresponsible I'm being with that advice, especially from the staunch soil test believers. But as it turns out, maybe we've all had it wrong in one way or another. New lawn care channels are popping up on YouTube all the time. But it wasn't until I started watching Dr. TravisShaddox over at Turfgrass Epistemology that this all made more sense to me. He provided real evidence that finally got me rethinking my approach and practices to phosphorus. Now, I'm going to keep my comments on him short so as not to misquote him or put words into his mouth.
Well, thank you. The last thing anybody wants, including him, including anybody else, is to be taken out of context. But I appreciate his consideration, that's for sure. But I'm nice. I'm friendly. I'm not going to, I hope I come across as friendly. I don't have any interest other than the claims. I'm interested in truth claims, and I'll viciously attack claims. But the people, I love people. I have no. I'm kind. I'm not going to bite. But thank you for your consideration.
He he explained things, research indicates that soil test numbers don't always provide a reliable means to dictate the nutrients your grass needs from fertilizer. In other words, those soil test numbers don't mean much. Most of the time, all your turf grass really needs.
For those of you who might not have seen some of the channel, some of my channel, and this is the first time you're hearing it, when he's saying soil test values don't mean much, I've mentioned that several times, and I just want to make sure where I'm clear is that they don't really mean that much to me. Just looking at a number on a test, unless I'm using that number for some evidence-based purpose. In other words, if the turf grass isn't looking acceptable or there's some problem and I'm trying to diagnose the turf grass issue, then I'll take a soil test to kind of help guide me. Or if there's been a pre-existing condition, I'm trying to keep track of it, then there could be some value there. But I just want to make sure we're clear is that when he says that, I don't want to speak for him, but there is a lot of value to that approach. And what he's saying is, it's not that the soil test doesn't mean anything, but I mean, for the general use of soil tests, generally the way we use soil tests, or the majority of people use soil tests, that's what I'm talking about. That's not really warranted. There's not a lot of evidence to support, oh, my phosphorus is 30 parts per million, so I got to go throw down phosphorus. I want to make sure we're clear on that, is that I'm not anti-soil test. I'm anti-soil test for no good reason. And just because a soil test says it's low does not mean that it's low unless I have more information about how the soil test was taken and how the correlation was done at that lab, what the extractant was, what the turf grass was, and all. I need more information. Because in the majority of cases, these soil tests, the interpretation of the test, were not done on turf grass plots. They were done on alfalfa or sorghum or something else. And their values, their critical values for corn or whatever they did, are nowhere remotely close to turf grass values. Turf grass values are almost always much lower than the critical level that they have at the lab. So that's one reason I don't have a lot of confidence in whatever number they want to put on a soil test. And then they want to recommend buying their product and putting out potassium or something. There's just not a lot there. I got to shut up. I got to keep going. I'm sorry. I'm going to be here forever.
Needs is nitrogen, and that's it. Only when you see a problem in your lawn, the key point being see, should you consider other nutrients to fix it. At which point, perhaps there's an issue with your phosphorus and or potassium levels, and a soil test might help guide you. After learning all this, now I have no reason to regularly apply fertilizers with high potassium and phosphorus.
Yes. That's what I'm going for. He has no good reason to apply high levels of phosphorus and potassium.
Levels like...
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about. I don't know this man. I don't know all the drama behind anything else in other channels and all this other stuff. Who gets along, who doesn't get along. I couldn't care less about that. What I care about is people who have been used to doing things a certain way is fine, but question and critically think your way through your program and reflect on it and ask, why am I? How do I know? This is epistemology. How do I know I need a 10-10-10? The 10 phosphorus. How do I know I need a 10 potassium? 13-13-13. Well, there's a pretty good case to be made for the nitrogen, a very strong case to be made for the nitrogen. But how do I know I need to pay for that phosphorus and potassium? That's what I'm trying to get across to people. Ask yourself, how do you know? And what's inevitably going to happen if you're intellectually honest with yourself, you're going to realize you don't know. And you're going to start asking questions to specialists like myself or any of the other professors and doctors around the United States or the world. Many, many people who are specialists in this area who can help you and guide you. And they're generally going to get their opinion and their information from the published literature or from their research that they've conducted. And the chances are much greater that if following those recommendations and those best management practices you're going to have a greater chance of forming a more efficient nutrient management program with your turf grasses. That's what I'm trying to get across. And I'm so happy. So happy.
a triple 10 or 13, much less add a biosolid on top of that. So this season, I'll be looking into more nitrogen-rich fertilizers with the other two numbers sitting at 0.
I mean, I don't know who this guy is. Someone's got to give me his name or his email or something. I got to call this guy. I mean, I got to sell. I'm telling. I mean, you know what? I'm telling you, thank you right here on my channel. Thank you for doing whatever you're doing. I don't care what you did in the past. I couldn't care less who. I mean, whatever. I'm not involved with all the lawn care drama in the background. I'm letting you know that from what I'm inferring from what you've said on your channel here is that you used to do it one way, and based upon the information you gained from the Turfgrass epistemology channel, that you've rethought how you do things and you're making adjustments, and those adjustments are lowering or eliminating phosphorus and lowering or eliminating potassium. And in the great majority of cases, if you do that, you're probably going to result in the same quality lawn, if not better in some cases, particularly if you're applying too much potassium. The potassium's causing some other issues, and you're going to do it for less money. The product you're going to result in, i.e., the lawn or your customer's lawn, is probably going to be as good or better than it was before, and you're going to do it for less money. That's BMP right there. I mean, those are best management practices. That's what we're here for. Keep going.
Even further, I have no reason to ever perform a soil test on my lawn to dictate my fertilizer decisions, unless, of course, I see something wrong. So until then, I'm going to keep relying on the one method and two things that have never let me down: my own eyeballs.
Yeah, so that's it. And he ends it. So I'm not going to nitpick it because there's a little bit there at the end. You can your senses can deceive you. I'm not going to go down that road right now. His point is my point, and that is, stop looking at numbers on a piece of paper, because those numbers are not like medical test numbers. They're not that reliable. We have nowhere near the confidence in soil test numbers as they do in the medical world. Even in the medical world, they can be wrong, but at least there's a great deal of work and confidence and research done in that world where the numbers are, in the ballpark. I mean, they're going to know what a high cholesterol level is. They're going to know your risk and so forth. And in turfgrass, we don't have millions and millions and millions of dollars that we've relied upon to do all this work, and we have strong value. We don't have that, okay? So stop looking at numbers on a piece of paper unless you actually see something wrong with your turf and you're trying to diagnose a problem, or if historically you've been low in sulfate or you've been low in phosphorus and you're trying to do the applications to kind of keep that turfgrass, supplied with a deficient element. Those are different cases where you're familiar, historically you've been low. So you want to keep track of that over time. Those are good reasons. Okay, but his point is you don't really have to take a soil test unless you have a problem, and that's what I've been saying. And I know the argument against it where you say, well, I don't ever want to have a problem. Okay, and I'll go into that when I get into soil testing. If you're going to come and say, well, Travis, I don't ever want my turfgrass to be deficient in this nutrient. Okay, if that's your argument, you better think long and hard about that before you come to me with that argument, because I'm going to obliterate it. Okay, that's a horrible argument, and I'm going to go into that argument whenever I get to soil testing, whenever that is, probably sometime later in this year. I got so many other topics lined up.